To start off our conversation, Gihan, we recently saw the release of this year's most respected ranking, and John Keells has once again come up on top, I think, for the 19th year in total. What do you think is the mantra that is getting John Keells there?
I think for us it is about doing the right thing. It is believing in what you truly want to do and not really looking for an outcome. So I think staying relevant with the times, with the different stakeholder groups, the customers, our own people, our employees, I think that's one of the key things. As a result of that agility and staying relevant, I think that's what actually makes something sustainable. So I think those are some of the key things that underpin what we do. And like I said, it is humbling that we are recognized for that in terms of an outcome. I think the mantra itself, Ruwandi, has not really changed. I think it's about doing what you truly believe in, staying true to those values and sort of delivering that consistently. So we've had to evolve as well, but the core mantra itself I don't think really changes, but obviously the actions that you have to do over those years.
LMD recently released its most respected listing for this year. And today we are going to be in conversation with Gihan Cooray on what it means to be Sri Lanka's most respected entity.
Some bonds give more returns. Get more security and more interest on your fixed deposits from Sri Lanka's largest finance company, LMDtv Finance.
The latest issue of LMD is available at lmdmall.lk as well as selected supermarkets and bookshops. You can also access the digital version on WhatsApp and our social media platforms.
Hello and welcome to LMDtv. The topic of conversation today is most respected entities, and I'm here with the Deputy Chairperson and the Group Finance Director of John Keells Holdings, Gihan Cooray. Gihan, it's lovely to have you on our show.
Thank you very much for having me on the program, Ruwandi. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. To start off our conversation, Gihan, we recently saw the release of this year's most respected ranking, and John Keells has once again come up on top, I think, for the 19th year in total, which is quite an achievement. So I want to ask you, what does it mean and what does it feel like to be Sri Lanka's most respected entity repeatedly? And what do you think is the mantra that is getting John Keells there?
Firstly, it is humbling and rewarding to be recognized for this, and thank everyone involved for this accolade. I think for us it is about doing the right thing. Yeah. It is believing in what you truly want to do and not really looking for an outcome. The outcome is of course rewarding, but it's, I think, what we believe is more the process that we follow. In terms of how we look at things in the group, it is about the integrity of the process. It is about governance, a strong focus on governance, and also being agile, being relevant with the times. I think that is something that has helped us to maintain that consistency. Because if you look at it over the last roughly 20 years, a lot has changed in the world, a lot has changed in the way businesses function and operate, governance requirements, and the world itself has evolved a lot. So I think staying relevant with the times, with the different stakeholder groups, the customers, our own people, our employees, I think that's one of the key things. And as a result of that agility and staying relevant, I think that's what actually makes something sustainable. In terms of our mantra, I think if you look at our values, I think we focus on the core values of the group. And some of it, I think, embodies what we have embodied in those values, ultimately give us that outcome of, how one would look at being respected. So the integrity and trust that you have is one of the key pillars or cornerstones that we have. Excellence in terms of business performance or excellence in anything that we strive to do. Caring for our people, as well as our own employees, as well as our stakeholders. the community and what we do there as well. So I think those are some of the key things that underpin what we do. And like I said earlier, I think because that's part of our core values and the way we do things, I think we like to think that that's the end result. And like I said, it is humbling that we are recognized for that in terms of an outcome.
Gihan, like you said, it's over a period of 20 years, and that's a long time. And the world has changed, business has changed, Sri Lanka has changed. How has the mantra changed over these years that still resulted in John Keells, gaining and claiming and keeping that top position?
I think the mantra itself, Ruwandi, has not really changed. I think it's about doing what you truly believe in, staying true to those values and sort of delivering that consistently. So overall, the mantra itself hasn't changed. If you look at our values, a lot of these core values have been the same. But having said that, at the same time, there is an evolution. Like I said earlier, the business world has evolved. If you look at the focus today from, say, 20 years ago, things like sustainability, if you look at ESG, the focus on those aspects, the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion has changed a lot. And that's something we have pioneered in the last few years in terms of a lot of our initiatives that focus on these areas, whether it be equal parental leave, focus on women participation in our labor force, and a whole host of other initiatives that we've taken on this front in terms of being inclusive. So I think we've had to evolve as well, but the core mantra itself, I don't think really changes, but obviously the actions that you have to do over those years does change, and I think that's what has helped us to sort of stay the course, so to say.
Getting into a little bit of specifics, what would you say from your point of view are the three most critical elements when it comes to gaining the respect of multiple and various stakeholders?
I think, there are a couple of things that I can think of. One is the transparency and integrity in terms of how you conduct your operations. So for John Keells, governance and transparency has been a sort of cornerstone or absolutely strong foundation and pillar in terms of what we do. If you look at JK from the time we were listed in 1986, and we've diversified our shareholder base, at any given time we've sort of had strong foreign institutional shareholder base. Today we are almost 40% foreign held, and we've been listed. There's no controlling shareholder at John Keells. It's management led and run. So all these have sort of meant that we've not only had to, but because we believed in it, laid that foundation of a very strong platform for governance. So if you look at even from starting from the composition of our board, we have a majority independent, non-executive led board with just two executive directors being the chairperson, CEO, and myself. So we have to function in that sort of environment where it is a majority independent led board. And of course, there's enough empowerment to management to ensure that we can run the company with the agility that it needs, but with those checks and balances in place as well. So I think that's one of the key things I can think of. The second one is taking a very stakeholder-centric approach. So not just our customers, but whether it's the sort of entire value chain of suppliers, partners, and the community, as well as our own people. So in whatever we tend to do and look at, I think we look at that stakeholder-centric approach, understanding the perspectives and needs of those stakeholders, and then take actions accordingly. Connected with that, of course, is how you conduct business itself, the excellence that you strive to deliver. I think as a group, we have undertaken landmark projects, and I think that's been one of the key successes of the John Keells Group over the last many years, or over the last many decades, I would say. And the next point I'd like to point out, which I already did touch on, so excuse me if I sort of repeat a little bit of things, but essentially, I think one of the key things is staying relevant and consistent with how you look at things. So when I say relevant and consistent, it sort of does sound somewhat contradictory in a sense, but consistent in terms of what you do, but relevant with the times. So that evolution, I think, is absolutely important. And John Keells, as you all know, is a 150-year company with that sort of heritage. But over the times, I think we always talk of reinventing ourselves and being relevant with the times. But at the same time, it's about innovation and sort of being able to take those strong decisions. And I think we've done that over the many years. So whether it was participating or being sort of pivotal with the first private-public partnership with our investment in the Port of Colombo, with the SAGT investment, or even during the pandemic. We have the Cinnamon Life project, or what's now known as City of Dreams Sri Lanka, where we sort of continued that project. Yes, it's been delayed, but having said that, despite multiple setbacks, 2 years of the pandemic, the financial crisis in Sri Lanka, despite all that, we've sort of stayed the course, and we are now due to open the first phase of it, with the hotel opening in October this year. So I think we've seen those through and ensured that those large ticket investments, which will be transformational for Sri Lanka, not just John Keells, but Sri Lanka as a whole, have come through. It's actually during the financial crisis that we also committed to another large investment in partnership with the Adani Group, which is the West Container Terminal in the Port of Colombo. So that happened in the peak of all these issues, and now we are actually about to operationalize that project in the first quarter of calendar year 2025. So committing to that type of investment, getting a partner like Adani to come into and commit to Sri Lanka at that time, I think sort of showcases the sort of investment appetite. When I say risk-taking, I think it is risk, but it is with a long-term view of what things can be. So I think those are some of the areas that we have focused. When I look at relevance also, I think it's that agility that you have to evolve with the times. So if you look at how we looked at things during the pandemic and the financial crisis, with the country and our people in the country going through many challenges, we've looked at our whole John Keells Foundation and the way we look at corporate social responsibility as being more empowering people, developing their livelihoods. So that's been our mantra. But during this period, we actually, and we heavily debated this internally to say, is it about giving someone the rod to fish, or is it really giving the fish? And we've always believed in giving the rod. But this time around, we actually felt, if people were lacking nutrition, kids were not going to school because they didn't have meals, then we looked at it to say, no, this may be the time that we need to change that. And doesn't mean we are deviating completely from that path, but the need of the hour was to help people at that point of time, and there was no point
to cross that threshold.
Absolutely. So there's no point in giving a rod to someone if they actually are hungry and need food. So we had many initiatives on that front, from developing community kitchens in our neighborhood schools in around the businesses where we operate in, as well as other initiatives about sort of partnering with our other stakeholders like customers, where we sort of contributed a 1-for-1 in terms of people buying meal vouchers, things like that. And even, which we normally would have considered philanthropy, but essentially where we contributed 100 million rupees to the Suvasaria, the ambulance network, which at the time was in critical need of funds to ensure that the operations would continue. So I think it's that ability to pivot, stand for what you believe in, voice things when you need to at the right time, that I think are some of the hallmarks for success.
And you keep coming back to that direction, but being agile to, cross over and do what is necessary.
I think that is important, whether it's in terms of how you conduct your business and how you evolve, or how you look at some of these other areas. I touched on even things like DE&I earlier, and we've been at the forefront here. We've taken a strong leadership position in terms of driving this. And despite our heritage, or one may think that being a 150-year-old company, that we will be slow to adopt these things, but we've been sometimes at that sort of cutting edge, whether it was being one of the first company to adopt ERP system almost 20 years ago, or taking a leadership position on things like equity, inclusivity, and diversity, which we have done with many initiatives.
It's time to take a very short break, but we'll soon be back to talk more about most respected entities.
What makes a truly awesome insurance company? Is it the skills to manage big numbers and big responsibilities? Well, that's definitely part of it. But there's more. It's the people. They're awesome. Super passionate about looking out for others and putting in their time for people's finances. It's not just the people. It's how we do things that's awesome. From being trendsetters of the industry to being connectors or inventors. It's about well-being and how we achieve it. Our teams hustle non-stop to meet the needs of the people. That's why we're on the rise. But it's not just about how we do things either. It's about how we improve things. Helping our clients thrive in a world that's full of awesome goals to achieve. Making the maximum out of the minimum. But wait, there's more to it. There's one last thing that truly makes an insurance company awesome. It's that we care about our people and our customers. All of this combined, it's been a pretty awesome year. And we're excited for tomorrow.
Display your brand message on digital screens at prime locations. The largest digital advertising network in Sri Lanka. Emerging Media.
Welcome back to the show. We're in conversation with the Deputy Chairperson and the Group Finance Director of John Keells Holdings, Gihan Cooray. Like you said, you spoke of agility and staying relevant, and I think that's very important when you're a 150-year young company, if I would say it like that. So technology inadvertently comes into the picture when we are talking about staying relevant in this day and age. How is technology changing the game for companies when we look at it from the perspective of gaining respect?
I think technology underpins everything that we do, and we look at it more as a sort of almost a means to an end in terms of what we want to achieve. So if you look at it from different stakeholder groups, and I'm not going to cover everyone, but if you look at it from a customer point of view and being one of the most important stakeholders, how you serve your customer, technology plays an absolutely important role. Not just in terms of the interface with the customer. So increasingly, if you look at customer touch points and the way customers want to be spoken to or contact you, or even whether it's sort of transacting with you, technology plays an absolutely important role. So if you don't evolve with that and keep pace with what customer needs and wants are, then your business itself is going to take a back seat.
Sure.
And there in the group, Ruwandi, we've had different initiatives like looking at how we look at disruptive innovation, not just from a technology standpoint, but process standpoint and so on, which I think that mindset, not to say we are great at it, but I think we've at least said that that's something that needs to be top of the mind when we look at solutioning and looking at our businesses. So that I think has helped in terms of how we look at our customers and how we serve them. Similarly, technology at a back end will ensure that we can be more productive. The efficiencies that you look at that ultimately also translate to value to customers, because it's a question of then how efficiently can you produce or how profitable you are, which also then addresses your investors and shareholder as a stakeholder group. If I look at then our people as another pivotal, one of our most important assets in the group in terms of ultimately what we deliver for all our stakeholders, is done through our people. So how does technology play a part in how people will function on a day-to-day basis? So today, if you look at it, how things have evolved from even a recruitment perspective. Then it's a question of, how do you recruit? How do you even attract talent? How do you even get their attention initially when you are looking to attract talent? So that in itself, I think, has evolved a lot in terms of how does one use technology, digital media, marketing, and so on to reach that particular segment. Once you reach them, then it's a question of, you onboard them and they're working with you, but how do you enable them and empower them today with technology? And also I spoke of earlier productivity or efficiencies from a customer standpoint, but ultimately it's the people who need to deliver that. So how do we ensure that our people can function more productively? So today, I know it's early days, but at the same time, we've also adopted things like, AI, Gen AI, which need to then come in. So if you take examples of people being able to productively do work, there's a lot of resources out there. So how do you sort of harness that ability to do it that much more productively, which ultimately helps them, helps the organization, and helps the customers and other stakeholders we serve. Now, with this in mind, a few years ago, I'll just give you an example of this, and I'll take a few minutes over this, is that we started a data analytics transformation journey around, I think it's about 4 years ago. We started just with the onset of the pandemic, or just before that, actually. And we stayed the course during the pandemic, and it was quite tough. But I think the teams were very resilient in terms of seeing this through. So the whole data analytics transformation journey is, yes, there's technology behind it. It's about using the power of all the data that we have, the information that we have, but translating those to use cases and solutions that can help either our customers, our employees, or even our profitability at the end of it. So today we have around 60 data scientists and data engineers in the group who work on these solutions, working in our different business verticals. And why we call it an analytics transformation journey is it just goes beyond the technology side of it in terms of looking at use cases, writing algorithms, or coming up with solutions, but also then how do people take those on board. So essentially you're looking at things like where people need to rely on not just their previous intuition or how a decision was made, but now look at data-driven decisions where you might have a tab that essentially gives you a dashboard that might prompt you to say, maybe this is the composition of how you sell something, or whatever it is. So now you're changing the mindset and behavior of our people to be able to take on board those things to deliver it. So I think technology, like I said, underpins some of this. It's not all necessarily technology driven, but ultimately it has a profound impact in terms of how this impacts the way we work, our people, but also how we serve our customers, the ecosystem that we create with our customers, because ultimately it's not about only just creating the profit and driving it, but it's creating that stickiness with your customers so that you have a very much more customer-centric approach, understanding the customer's needs and wants. Of course, with all this, looking at data governance and privacy being at the forefront. So we are very mindful of how we look at it. But, that's almost a hygiene factor that you ensure you look at. But with all this, I think, we have transformed the way in which we work in some of these businesses. And it's, I think, exciting because it's early part of our journey. When I say early part, we've been at this for 4 years. But still, but I think in terms of creating that impact, and thankfully now we have a more normal environment in the country, because otherwise a lot of these things were getting rolled out whilst we were having so many disruptions. So the full impact of some of these initiatives we didn't fully benefit from. But I think now in this sort of current environment, we are very confident that we will see the full benefits translate.
Gihan, I'm going to ask you a question on a slightly different angle. You mentioned several stakeholders in your previous answers, like the employees, community, investors, and everyone. Going ahead, who do you think, this is not a fair question, but who do you think is going to be the main stakeholder group that we should be focused on when it comes to gaining respect?
I think gaining respect it's a difficult one, Ruwandi, as you said, to narrow it down and pinpoint to one stakeholder group, because I think respect is earned all around. It's not by catering to one particular stakeholder group. And like I said, it's not necessarily where you sort of have initiatives to say, look, how do I gain respect? But it's doing what you think is right, what you believe in, and the outcome is that someone may then respect you. But also then it's a question of which stakeholder group. And I think it's about doing a wide variety of activities in any case. But as we've always said, people are our greatest asset, and not to single people out, but obviously if our own people are not sort of, don't have the conviction and belief that we are doing the right thing and they respect the organization, because they are ultimately our ambassadors in terms of everything that one does. So if they are not convinced and they don't respect the organization, then irrespective of anything else you do, I think that message over time, at least, will erode. If I were to narrow it down, I'd say obviously our people, for the reasons I mentioned. It's not that, like I said, you cannot ignore any stakeholder group, or not that you target and say, let's just look after our people. Because if you don't conduct your business with integrity, honesty, or you don't have excellence in terms of how you serve your customers, it's going to catch up with you in some form or shape. But if you don't have your employees or people on board, then irrespective of everything else you do, I think it'll be very difficult to sustain. I think also, if I may just sort of add a different perspective, if you look at how things have evolved, you see a lot more activism taking place today. You see the role of regulators at times, taking a more predominant position. So I think that's another stakeholder group that one needs to be mindful of. Of course, doesn't mean that when we look at regulations, again, I think it's important that sometimes when we form regulations in a country, and I'm not talking necessarily from, the laws of the land, but even the smaller regulations, ultimately, again, relevance is very important. So if you look at from a transparency or even say disclosure standpoint, if you sort of take it closer to home, for me being a finance person as well, sometimes it's about finding that balance. So you can say disclosing everything is great, but then the question is, how does one cut through the clutter? Because, having a 1,000-page disclosure does not mean you're necessarily transparent or good, because it's not throwing in everything into it, because how does then a recipient of that information distill through to understand what is really useful and or not? So I think finding that balance is very important. So similarly, when you deal with regulators, it's again finding that balance, active engagement with those stakeholder groups to really see what is needed and what is needed for the country in the context of everything that we have as well. But I think that will be an important stakeholder group. Not to say it's not important now, but might become sort of more relevant as well as we go ahead.
Again, we are almost at the end of our conversation, but I'm going to ask you something on behalf of LMD. So we have been, ranking the most respected entities in Sri Lanka for a long time. And this year, we actually saw a lot of new criteria come in, and there were a lot of revisions in the measurement and analysis criteria. What are your thoughts on these revisions, and how do you think that they added value to this year's list?
I think I did see some of the new criteria that's come in, and we spoke a lot about people or employees, and criteria like employee well-being coming in is good, because it sort of should be reflected, and when one does a survey, then that's a strong consideration. So areas like tax and compliance, I think these are good things. I think sometimes when you have new criteria coming in, it's a question of one having clarity as to what you really mean by that. I think in terms of the criteria that's come out, there is corporate sustainability that's there, but the social responsibility, that aspect of it has come out. Now, depending on how you look at it, you could argue that sustainability will encompass and include aspects of CSR as well. But I think that community engagement aspect and focus of a corporate on the community is important. So then it's a question of where this gets captured. So you have sort of nation-mindedness or corporate sustainability. So it could potentially sit within that. But I think that focus on that earlier was there. So if at all, maybe that's an area for you all to consider. But otherwise, I think some of the new criteria that's come in is positive. It's good.
Thank you. Again, it's been a delightful and very insightful conversation. But before we let you go, can I ask you if you have any closing thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, thanks, Ruwandi. It's been a very interesting conversation. Just in terms of, some of the areas I already spoke of, so pardon the repeat, but I think we spoke a lot about different aspects, including integrity and honesty. I think ultimately for me, if one does, the right thing, you have to truly believe in doing the right thing and do it for those reasons. It's not the outcome of looking for an accolade or award, but I think it's following a process. So in sort of cricket terminology, because that's sort of cricket fever is a little high right now, you talk a lot about don't focus on the result of whether you win or not, but follow the process of doing what you need to do in terms of doing the right thing. So I think for me, for John Keells, it is really about that. The governance, I think that does pay. Sometimes governance and doing the right thing, at times, people will question it takes longer to do things. Sometimes you can't do things. But I think in the long run, it pays. If you look at it today in terms of our shareholders and investors, I think that's something they truly value in John Keells, in the leadership and the people of the company. Sometimes when we have in meetings with our investors, the conversations, we have 1 hour meetings with them, and most of that time is actually taken on understanding the values of the company, the governance, the process, what we are doing, as opposed to talking about the business itself, because they say, okay, that we can see in terms of the results and the outcomes, and we'll sort of spend a few minutes to understand what you are doing. But a lot of the conversation is about understanding that. So I think that is the foundation for everything. And if you continue to do that, I think the outcome will come, the results will come. Of course, you have to focus on that. Yes. But I think that for me is one of the key points to take away.
Thank you. Like we said, Gihan, it's been a lovely conversation. Wish we had more time. Thank you very much for being here with us. We've been in conversation with the Deputy Chairperson and the Group Finance Director of John Keells Holdings, Gihan Cooray. Thank you very much for being part of our show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to our audience for joining us. Until next time, take care.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. Thank you for watching and stay safe.